Welcome to the Athlete Lab podcast, where we discuss the habits, the characteristics, and everything else that's needed to drive elite performance. Today, we're honored to be joined by Chris Palmer, mental sports professional, and somebody that we've talked quite a bit about already, just all the great work he's done. And then Jeff Lerg. Jeff Lerg is former professional hockey player, NCAA legend, and goalie coach and mentor here at the Athlete Academy. So really happy to have both these guys here with us, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we're fired up to be here,
So we're doing this as a collaborative podcast with your Dialed and Driven podcast. So this is something that, to me, is the first time doing this type of collaboration, joint podcast. So it's going to be fun. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks.
So we sit here today, and you guys you work on a daily basis with athletes. Tell me some of the things, like, first of all, how did your relationship kind of grow to kind of hone in on something that you both are so passionate about, and, what brought you two together?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I think that it's really strange because Jeff and I couldn't be more opposite. Jeff's one of these guys he lives by dialed and driven. It's this whole thing. It's really what built this. I'm categorically dialed and driven, so not in every aspect of my life. But I'm a psycho in two areas, taking care of my family and helping people figure out what they want in their careers. It's amazing that over time, maybe 5 years ago, we started working together at his camps, and he came into the first camp. I remember his eyes getting real big because I'm out of control when I do my thing. And from that, we just took baby steps, and more there was working more with individual guys, and it just made sense for him where he was going and where I was going just to come together, because in the end we both want the same thing. We want to absolutely try as much as we can every day we have to exist to help change the lives of people and help them figure out they can have things they actually want. We both do it different ways, but it's incredibly oddly harmonious.
Yeah, and Chris and I, coincidentally, are neighbors, live in the same neighborhood. That just happened he moved here from Florida by about, 6 years ago or so, 5-6 years ago. And then we just kind of found out through our works within youth hockey that we were neighbors. And then as we got connected, I had him come out to the goalie school that I run, and he worked with some athletes. And then as we launched the Athlete Academy here 3 years ago, Tom Anastas had a vision of getting a mentor performance coach here on site, and I obviously opened the door to get Chris going, and then our relationship built from there. And then as time evolved, we just really gelled with one another, coming at it from different angles, and we kind of found this little recipe of the way he says and phrases things with his experience, and then with my hockey experience, and then goaltending specifically, found a good finalized product to help people accomplish their goals.
Yeah, as you guys know, my background is a little bit in the goalie scouting and athlete development area. So I think that, like, the mental sports performance, as it's become more and more mainstream, which is awesome for all athletes. Goalies are sort of ahead of the curve. They're a little bit ahead of the curve in individual training in a way. Like, there's vision training, there's all these different aspects. But it's cool to hear how you guys kind of came together, as goaltending being a little bit ahead of the curve. Chris, I love the categorically dialed and driven in your life. I'm going to definitely use that, because that's something that I think a lot of people can relate to. But when it comes to athlete development, we start to talk about, like, young athletes. And as they progress through their lives and they're trying to figure out, when they can focus and how they can focus and how they can still be kids, what are some of the things you guys deal with on a daily basis with more of that, let's say the 12, 13, 14-year-old athlete who knows they really want to be good, but they really haven't got to that area where they're really feeling the rewards of it. It's more just the pressure of that, like, pre being good or pre being evaluated at the higher level. So what do you guys see in that, and how do you handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I think as you jump into adolescence, just regular human, it's tough, right? Because you go from being this kid believing in Santa Claus, and you're trying to figure out this whole new thing. But in hockey, it's even worse, because in hockey, it's this great blessing of a thing. You have these amazing, covetable thing, this path to the NHL. But along with that comes this practicality. This is a business. There's people trying to win games, and you go to teams because they win. So winning becomes an integral part no matter what we want. And that winning sometimes trumps development, and sometimes it supports development. So it's really, really hard. You're this kid with these big dreams, and all of a sudden this algorithm that you grew up with isn't true anymore. The algorithm we're all taught when we're little is work hard, good things happen, work hard, good things happen. And that's true in the long term, but in the short term, it's not true. That's the adult truth. You can bust your tail, and sometimes bad things happen, injuries, passed over, whatever the thing is. In hockey, because it's such a fast thing, that there's no time really for immediate coaching. I mean, what's there, 2 breaks in a whole game if there's no ice cuts? 2 minutes of break in an hour? It's crazy. So you got coaches acting as air traffic controllers. You got moms and dads who want well. You got kids who have all these desires. And it makes this thing that transitions you to adulthood so quickly. And I think that's the hardest part. And the sooner you can see that there's nothing evil about it, it's just difficult, and really make peace with that, then you can get all the good stuff. There's amazing opportunity, but it's on the other side of this having to grow up quickly.
Yeah.
And really, you mentioned it in your comment and question, is the delayed gratification. That's something in this day and age that no one wants to get accustomed to. You know, I could order groceries from my wife sitting at home right now and they'd be delivered. You know, that's how quick things are tended to happen in this modern day. But that's not how sports work. That's not how goal setting and accomplishing your goals work. So that's an uncomfortable feeling for many of these athletes. And then pretty much all the athletes growing up now have a different landscape than when we grew up. We were used to that delayed gratification and show up consistently and keep doing your best and keep doing your best. And eventually, you know, if you keep performing well, it should pay off. That becomes a tougher message to, I don't want to use the phrase sell, but in a sense to keep reiterating to all the athletes growing up right now. It's that delayed gratification. And at the end of the day, it's very tough to show up and perform well consistently. You know, that, you know, from the hockey pyramid, that's how you rise to the top, is showing up and playing really well consistently, and then eventually you'll get noticed and you'll dominate your current level. And I know I use that phrase a lot, dominate your current level, but you have to be overwhelmingly awesome to stand out. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I have with the teenage athletes when trying to coach them and mentor them is really getting them to understand that. Is, you know, yeah, you want to be a good teammate, you want to be part of your team and help your team win. But at the end of the day, if you're kind of barely scratching and clawing to make the lineup, then having that goal to be at the NCAA Division I college hockey level, it isn't as easy as you may think it is. So those are some of the challenges we deal with.
Yeah, that's the idea. I think it's an easy thing to say, trust the process. You hear that all the time, or, you know, enjoy the ride. I think that for coaches and for parents and athletes, understanding that next day at practice, like the most important thing you can do is do your best at that practice, enjoy it, and understand that it's not always going to be about that next stage, or, you know, it's not seeing that, you know, that instant gratification needs to be that you were successful in that drill, and success means that you gave your best effort. And those are the things that those building blocks are really important. And so Jeff was obviously, as a goalie, you played in some super, super high pressure games, won an national championship in college. You went and played pro in one of the most high pressure environments in the minor leagues I've seen firsthand, Toledo, where they've got fans who are as rabid as there is in sports, with expectations to win championships. And from a goalie's perspective in general, and this goes for any kind of athlete that's maybe in an individual sport, you know, playing tennis, you're playing golf, like goalie is a really unique mental component. So talk about some of the things that you kind of try to reiterate with like goalies you might work with, but also you might have learned if you ever learned the hard way with that, knowing how important the mental side is.
Yeah, the mentality piece, you know, you don't really know it when you sign up to play the position. You know, you play it, the puck doesn't hurt yet when you're young, you're fearless when you get in there. And then you learn along the way that there's a mentality that it takes to be successful. And something that I was taught when I was young, it was one of the best things I was ever taught, was don't let the opponents know they got the best of you. So I kind of always operated that way. I could let up a goal from the red line and I would act like nothing happened. You know, I could make an unbelievable diving save on an open net, act like nothing happened. So I built this routine of just consistency, never too high, never too low. And that's a skill to be developed. And I know for me as a youth, getting into teenager, into more competitive hockey, to work my way into the college landscape, that became a skill set of mine that helped me get noticed, was just that overall consistency. And I know from my assistant coach at Michigan State, he had to kind of sell me to the coaching staff there. I'm a 5'5" asthmatic goaltender who did a nebulizer breathing machine from the very first time I skated at 4 years old to the very last game I played at 32 years old. I needed a breathing machine just to be able to get on the ice. Every practice, every workout, every pregame skate, every game, I did a breathing machine before I played. So I was kind of a hard sell. I was also kind of the last of the dinosaur fossil of being a small goalie. I grew up in the era of the 5'8", 5'9" Stanley Cup winners, and I was really the only one playing over the course of a 10-year minor league period in that 5'5", 5'6" height. So what I'm getting at is the way that I got a college scholarship to Michigan State is that the assistant coach sold the coach, the head coach, said, this is the most consistent goaltender I've ever seen. He gets 50 shots in a game. He gets 12 shots in the game. He's the same goalie. And to me, I took a lot of pride upon hearing that from him, is because that's what got me where I wanted to get to. It was that consistent approach, never too high, never too low. And then that's where I've, kind of evolved. And now I try to reiterate that to the athlete, just being dialed and driven all the time. That's it. You're dialed and driven all the time in everything you do, and you never get too high, never get too low.
That's definitely a skill to be able to do that. And I think it's a skill that athletes kind of feed around the people around them as well. It's air traffic control, the analogy you use as far as what coaches are doing, how they're reacting. And for a young athlete, when they're dealing with the ups and downs of performance, not necessarily development, because we talk about development, but then we talk about performance. I think so much of what we're trying to work on is their performance, but the development word gets kind of put to the side until it's not. So when you're trying to help an athlete, like how much do you talk to them, not only about their own mentality, but dealing with the people around them, they're supporting, I don't know, it's on a staff, but you know what I mean by that, like their support network is the word I was looking for. So how much do you talk with the athlete about helping manage their support network?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you that people come to me when they have problems. They rarely come to me for proactivity. Now, there's guys I work with every week. There's guys I work with every month. But mostly, people initially come to me because they hit their head on something. Something's not working. And in almost every case, it has to do with the dynamic that's happening on the ice, on their team, with their coaches. And either something's going on where teammates are riding them, giving them a hard time. Coach maybe isn't giving them the time they think they should have. Usually things around that. And in some cases, it's worried about too much pressure from mom and dad or people who love them. So it's almost always about how they feel about how they're being treated. Because there is this kind of algorithm when you're younger and really as you get older, unless you learn this, where you kind of feel like the world is doing this to you. The world's doing this stuff. And instead of you realizing that the world does things, but you get to decide, like, where are you going to take the ship? What are you going to do? Are you going to sit here and be run over because something seems like it's bad? Or are you going to make peace with that and then decide, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? Because in the end, that's all you ever have. All you ever have is getting your butt up and doing your job. And Jeff talks about this. 28 years he played hockey. That's insane. I just did the math. I didn't realize it was 28 years. But in all that time, for him to be so consistent, he's not normal. That's not how it normally is. But he has actually trained from a young age to be not too high, not too low. So he built these kind of mental habits. But most people, they figure, oh, it's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. We learn that from an early age. But the real high thing, that once you get past that feeling like you're awful and let people puke out everything they feel, we get to the point where, hey, look, what's controllable still? What do you actually fully have control of? And in sports psychology, they talk about process. Process doesn't mean a lot to people, but they understand doing their job. And I can go around any room, anytime, and ask everybody, what's your job in hockey? What's your job? What's your hobby? And they tell me, like, in a second, block shots, do this, be the playmaker, whatever it is. That is your job. And if you can find a way to do your job, no matter what you think is unfair, no matter what you think is bad, then you're going to make most of the opportunity. That's the thing. So yes, people react all the time to the people around them. And they usually see what's going on with people around them in a way that's not correct, and it holds them back. So if I can help them change the thoughts to where they are, which, hey, this is unfortunate, it's unfortunate. Sometimes it's greasy, sometimes there's bad things. But for the most part, it's a bunch of people trying to make something happen in the confines of a sport where you've got to win to be able to attract players. And in the end, once you make peace with that, then you see all the opportunity. Then it's not, I'm getting beaten up by the world. It's, hey, this is part of being an adult. And it's so hard to go from believing in Santa Claus to all of a sudden making it and acting like an NHL person. It's a big jump.
Right. It's funny you bring up the fact that you mentioned earlier, people come to you when things aren't going well, and then like worrying about the process and kind of like managing how that with a negative rhetoric. Something I saw a lot working in the NHL and seeing young athletes, but from post-draft to turning pro, was actually struggling handling success. And they're in that cusp where they're doing well. They've done obviously really well before. Then they get to a level where they're like, oh, they're a step away from the NHL, and they're doing really well. And it's almost like now the reality of that next pressure hits them. it's like, wait a second, now it could be real, and understanding that. And so often with players who've matriculated to the top, they haven't hit enough roadblocks to know that they have to exercise the most important things. Where Jeff mentioned, like, maybe his roadblocks were obviously like the breathing aspect. We had to learn that, and then the height issue at some point where you were kind of managing too. So in a way, you developed all those different attributes that helped you be great at a younger age. But when players hit these roadblocks at older ages, it's harder because they've already been good. Oh, I don't need that. I don't need that type of training. So how can we, in an athlete development space, how can we get that message to more people more often and sooner, where it isn't as if they're only coming to mental sports performance with issues, or they're only developing this consistent routine because they don't want to be too high, too low. This is just their norm. Like, how can we do that as an athlete development culture?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. You got to harden them up a little bit. I was kind of, this big chip on my shoulder grew because I was kind of hardened up as this youth athlete trying to prove it to people. And I can completely see how those who've had easy success that don't quite have that chip on their shoulder might get bypassed by those that are just hungrier. So I attribute that specifically in training sessions, like, train hard. And I love the technology and the advancements that have been made in athletic development, but the old school, get out to the track and field, it's you versus that 110-yard sprint out ahead of you, just dig in and get it done. The science might tell you one thing, but just get out and do it and train hard. Become a monster in your off-ice training if you're a hockey player or any other athlete. When you're training, there's a certain mentality that it takes. And obviously you look at some of the best hockey players in the world, there's clips of them showing their off-ice training routines. It's not that they're kind of just sitting low, looking at their phone in between every rep. They train hard, and that's what really hardens the mentality. And that's whenever I go into a goalie training session in particular, I make those game situations way more difficult than they're going to see in a game. And that can be applied to all other sports, but that's just well known within the athletic world. Like those that train hard and put themselves in uncomfortable situations are going to be the ones that survive and thrive when times are tough.
I would love to chime in here. Dakota Joshua, I'm so lucky. He's the only guy I work with who's professional who actually doesn't make me sign a non-disclosure agreement. And no, seriously, because like guys in Europe, man, they don't want to talk at all. And I work with these guys, non-disclosure, don't share anything. But here, he actually is very vocal about mental performance. He's actually come in and worked with kids with me and told them the truth. And I tell this story about, had a kid who's 13 years old raise his hand and say, Dakota, I feel like a piece of crap a lot of the time. And instead of Dakota saying, work hard, son, get better, he says, hey, everybody feels like that. So do I. You know how awesome that is? That a guy who's big enough to be one of the hit leaders in the NHL, a guy who's a $13 million man, a guy who's doing great at 250 games, he comes out, speaks on mental performance. It's awesome. But there's this stigma, and people don't want to talk about this kind of stuff, but there shouldn't be a stigma. This is a real thing. It's about getting an advantage. And you ask what could be done. There is a disconnect that happens between childhood and adulthood. And in that, and wherever that happens, whether it happens early for Jeff learning to be tough and get kind of hard, or whether it's in adolescence having the world teach you to kind of be tough, we teach our kids very understandably from a young age, work hard, good things will happen. And that works so often. But if we could start early and say, as parents and coaches, work hard, and good things will happen in the long term. But by the way, there's falling down, there's breaking your leg, there's failure. And if we could start from an early age, lovingly as parents and nurturingly as coaches of really young athletes, 7, 8-year-old kids, tell them, hey, work hard and good things happen in the long term, but in the short term, you're gonna mess up. But the great thing is that failure is the portal to every great thing, if you let it be. Or that portal is where you're gonna give up and take your foot off the gas. So I think parents of young kids and coaches of young kids, if we start in the beginning, really revering failure, seeing it as the path to every great thing, everything can change. Because I'll tell you, Dakota came on our podcast before, and he even said, for him, we started working when he was in the AHL, going to the NHL. And he said on the podcast, one of the reasons I came to Palmer is because I was trying to figure out, like, how do I make this next jump? It's not so easy. And he's great at Ohio State, doing great. I mean, he's doing awesome. So truly, if we change the algorithm, we change the thought process and show that failure is the portal to everything, everything can change.
I completely agree. Probably I've been fortunate around this game my whole life, and the most fun I've had has been the last year coaching 10U, or last some spring and fall coaching 10U youth hockey, and the kids are just, they're magical to be around, because, the failure sometimes, you sit on the bench after maybe a tough shift or something goes wrong, but like that opportunity, let them know that's all that's what it's about. You're going to learn, you're going to get better. And then when you see that growth and the smiles, like that's the point of like all this, because what the game can ultimately give us, and all the things that we try to do and get these athletes to, I don't even like to say buy into, but just, to really make it part of who they are, embracing that failure. And you get a C on a test, like that's all right, you can get a B next time, but figure out what went wrong, and then also kind of embrace when you do it well. So, this whole thing I could talk about for days and days, because I really believe so wholeheartedly, and not only what it does for athletes, but what it does for ultimately in life. Chris, you gave a presentation today at the academy. We had one of our coaches in our organization listen in, and he was just like, from an athlete perspective, it's great. But from my life perspective, and he's an adult who's like, God, I learned so much. I think that there's so much to it. So talk a little bit about what you're doing on a daily or weekly basis with the academy kids. It's a couple times a week. Like, how do you guys decide like what curriculum's there, and what sort of growth have you seen in this so far this year and over the last couple of years in athletes?
Want to go first?
No, go ahead with the mental performance.
Yeah, so the mental performance side, there's really kind of two ways to do this. And we do a video part where we want to make sure that if somebody was absent, they can have a picture of what's going on. But there's some stuff that we do that should never be on video, because it's people trying to share things about themselves. So we split this into two things. In the end, I can be an academic. I can tell them, hey, this is visualization. Hey, this is how to do breath work. This is how to do meditation. This is how to do goal setting. We can work on these things, and we do. And you'll see that the recordings, it largely looks academic, where we talk about these fundamentals that have worked for years and years in sports psychology. But after that, I try to get to the practical stuff, and I try to find a way to have it fit them and where they are. Our whole thing when we created this was not to just tell a bunch of stuff, but was to really impact people in a customized way. So what we do, and it was the inception when Jeff kind of created this whole thing this whole thing was us trying to find a way to customize it. And that comes in these pieces of paper at the end of the lesson. So we'll have this lesson in the beginning. Like today, we talked about conscious living versus unconscious living, finding a way to do things. Is most of your behavior conscious, well thought out, intentional, or is most of your stuff kind of automatic, going through the motions? And that was the subject. We talked about that. But then I asked them to fill out on pieces of paper, tell me, how much of your life do you think you're spending kind of unconsciously without really thinking about what you want? How much are you spending actually going after the things you want? What's in the way? And then we ask every week something that's good and something that's bad, because it's important to face both. And the second half, we're reading those pieces of paper. I have to filter some of it, because some of the stuff you don't want to share in a group, but I can still do themes. If somebody tells me something pretty serious on there anonymously, I can say it's a relational thing or whatever. And then I encourage people to talk to one of us after, if they've got something else going on. But this way of customizing, talk to them about what's going on in their life right now. And at different times, like when we get into February, we start talking about state and nationals and things like that. Those pieces of paper are different. Those pieces of paper, hey, I want to do good here. We just lost a game. I missed some time. The draft's coming up. Nobody's talking to me. My advisor's not calling me back. If we keep customizing things to the stuff that's in their head right now, we can show the academic stuff, which is aspirational and proactive, but then the reactive stuff is, I think, what makes the difference here. We're not in the business of just throwing subjects at people. We're in the business of letting them know these things, hoping we can get proactivity, but then reacting to the things that are holding them back right now, because your thoughts either hold you back or move you forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Jeff, you do a lot of the mentorship stuff. How do these things align, and what have you learned from kind of with the work with Chris and what the kids, how they've responded, how they've reacted?
Yeah, exactly. So this is my third year being engaged with the academy. Obviously, a lot of pride in where it came from in year one to where it's gotten to in year three. And then with being engaged with Chris and some of our endeavors with our podcast and working together, I kind of knew the area that he works and is an expert in, and what he described. A lot of it is some of the kids working through some of their personal issues or internal issues, where I try to be that other piece of the recipe on just striving for greatness each and every day. My goal, my hope is to be that inspiration and help these athletes understand that anything is possible if you put your mind to it and you're goal setting and you're accomplishing the small goals and let that big picture take care of itself. If they can get that hyper focus on taking care of their day and taking care of their small goals, I truly believe that they can get to where they want to get to. So I sit down, I meet with the athletes on an individual basis at least once a month, but then also I have a curriculum that I see them weekly on as a group that is based upon standards and habits and goal setting in particular. And those are areas that just organically through my life, I've had a great product of the environment I am, a great family life, great friends, great people who push me along the way. And you mentioned it earlier, the people that you surround yourself with is often who you become. And I looked back, and I share this story with the athletes here. I look back when I was their age as a teenager, the top 5 people that I hung around with all became a captain at the college hockey Division I level and all played in the NHL. I'm the only one who didn't make it to the NHL, but I also was a college captain. So if you look, I look at my history, the people that I surrounded myself with when I was their age are the ones that pushed me to get to where I got to. They helped me get to accomplishing the goals. It wasn't just me and being dialed all the time. It was they were getting college scholarships. I wanted to get that college scholarship. They were leaders on the team. I wanted to become a leader on the team. So it's all this experience that I've had. I've been fortunate to experience many great coaches, many great people. I mean, I met you 20 years ago. You've been a part of my life of opening the door for me here at Suburban Sports Group. So all those pieces are a part of who I am. So I try to just reiterate a lot of those messages and kind of come at it from a different avenue from where Chris comes at it. And really with the end goal, just trying to have them get the best possible outcome for their experience here.
Yeah, there's so much there. It's who you surround yourself with. I often go back to what sports gives us is, there's so many layers to it. And those people you decide to surround yourself with, the ones you decide to call, you're thinking about, is this the type of environment I want to be in? Is this the result that I want to, the result I want to have? And there's so many times where you look around in the athletic world and you can almost watch someone interact in the first 5 minutes of practice or before they go in the locker room. You kind of have an idea, all right, which ones are, really, they're really, to use you guys term, dialed and driven. And then the ones that maybe you can just watch them say they've lived on skill, and to a certain point that doesn't necessarily add up. And I think our responsibility is to help those ones that live on skill. I think that that's something in youth sports often where in all sports really, the ones who star are the ones that the game comes easy to them. Sometimes coaches and mentors and stuff just let them go because they're doing well. Let's not bother them. But in actuality, those are the ones that we have to make sure that they're associating themselves with the right people, that they're doing all the right things because their potential or, they need to be held accountable. They need to be helped. And to your point about going to the track and just running. But part of that is what's really hard is to go to bed early. It's a sunny, it's hard when the other kids in the neighborhood who don't want to be athletes, it's time to go to bed. It's hard to eat, your broccoli and spinach before you have something else. But those are things that maybe it's, I don't know, depending on who it is. Sometimes for me, it's harder to say no to pizza than it is to go run that track. I'd like to do both, but that's categorically dialed and driven. I fall in that. Yeah. So the more that we can help athletes kind of understand that that's all part of it, it helps them in life. Because these skills you guys are talking about are incredible for Dakota Joshua and hopefully making that, his next contract even bigger, but also for all the athletes who maybe utilize sports as a vehicle through adolescence and, early adulthood, but then they're in the real world. There's we like to call it the real world. I don't know, Jeff, how you feel about it. I feel like delaying growing up is playing pro hockey. You know what I mean? And then we're all end up in the real world eventually. And these skills that you have, they pay off in multiple aspects. And that's something that we in the youth sports and athlete development, we can't lose sight of that. That's what we're actually providing. We hope that there's the Dakota Joshuas and the Jeff Lergs, those stories. But I think it's really important that youth coaches really look at it that way. That's what we're doing. It's not just about giving the parents something to cheer about in a tournament, So when you guys look at what you're trying to accomplish with your podcast and who you're trying to reach, what's your target? Are you looking to reach parents, athletes, coaches? Is it everybody? Kind of what's your intention with your podcast?
being that I was a goalie growing up and have a big goalie school, got connected with Chris to have him at the goalie school, we know that many of our listeners are goalies or goalie parents looking for some of the advice and feedback and stories that I've been able to share. But beyond that, many of these teaching points go beyond just goaltenders and other positions of hockey and also other sports. Like this hockey mentality can be applied in all sports and beyond athletics. It's just about really giving your best all the time, working through adversity, learning, being a lifelong learner, problem solving. And really a lot of my life experience has just come from my life as a hockey player and goaltender. So of course, as we've navigated through, we know that some of our messaging has been goalie centric, but we also have the intention to help and inspire, make this world a better place for all different athletes, endeavors, coaches, parents, etc. So I know Chris works with other athletes that are outside of hockey as well. So that's where we're just looking to be a positive influence in the athletic world as much as we can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this thing that I've believed pretty much my whole life, and that's that if you're truly, truly focused on something that you think is really purposeful for you, whether you think it's divinely inspired, the universe, whatever, you're doing something you really, really believe is like part of who you are and kind of your mission for life. If you're really, really doing that with everything you have, it tends to gravitate the people and organizations that need that. It does tend to, it's slower. It'd be a lot easier just to pay for a lot of advertising and kind of force things in. But for me, this whole thing started in running years ago. And really before that, it started in helping kids on the playground when I was a kid. I've always been this person to kind of help people with their stuff. I don't know why, but I've always been that person. But I became a runner. And I was a runner to pay for college mostly. It's not like I had some fascination with running. But I actually wound up being pretty good. It got me out of poverty. It paid for college. Got All-American. Got 4th in the country and 11th in the country. Got sponsored by Nike. There's these cool things that happen. Nothing near as glamorous as what you guys do. I mean, you're an NHL guy. It's ridiculous, the stuff you've done with NHL goalies. But in all of this, it didn't have to be glamorous. It was on this mission of what I wanted, the practicality of running. But it opened up these doors. I started coaching my college team. And after that, I got a master's in counseling psychology. Not that that's what I am, but these are all little pieces of this puzzle. And I realized I'd been doing this my whole life, kind of helping people my whole life. And as I went along, I started to love hockey. My kids were in hockey. I really, really love hockey. And hockey was like the worst marathon you could run, the worst pain of a 26-mile run for 3 hours of suffering in the sun, jammed into one shift, full of all the doubt, all the worry, all the triumph, all the disgust, everything. And to me, I'm just so intrigued because I don't know of a sport where more of your life flashes before your eyes in one shift or one rush. So to me, I started working with hockey athletes, and because hockey's so cool, other sports are like, well, God, if these tough hockey guys like this, it must be all right. So I've got guys from other sports talking to me. I've got Olympic ice dancers. I've got guys who've done archery, like national class archery guys in football, baseball, swimming, every other sport. So I think for me, it's always been about just trying to find some way to help people know they can have a life that they want, go for things they want, not be limited by their thoughts. And what we're doing is kind of the same thing. Yeah, this thing's kind of born in being a goalie for Jeff. It's in hockey for me. But in the end, what we're doing, it addresses everything. I mean, if you're a goalie, you're sitting there with the weight of the world on your shoulders, and it's not a damn goal until the puck goes by you. It's never a goal until the puck goes by you. It's always your fault. And it doesn't matter if there's 5 guys ahead of you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Shattuck or whatever it is. You are in a position where you just always feel the weight of that. What's more human than that? I'm responsible as a dad, as a CEO, as a guy working in a concrete factory, whatever it is. The weight of the world falls on all of us, and being able to deal with that is such a gigantic part of life. But the bigger part is finding a life in the middle of that kind of suffering that everybody has quietly. So to me, I'm sure that what we're creating here eventually will be found by other people, but it's definitely born in hockey.
Well, that's exceptionally well said. And I think one of my key takeaways from that is as hockey players, we've ran a bunch of marathons. So we can check.
There we go. Yeah. I don't have that sticker yet. But
the mental concept of playing a game pales in comparison to those last 3 hours of the marathon, or the last 3 hours. I'm giving away how long it would take me to run a marathon. But that was really, really the passion you both have for it, like just exudes. It's really cool. And I think that the more you're out there doing this, the better it's going to be for everybody, for youth athletes, professional athletes. It's really cool. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here today. This has been really good. And I really think that a lot of parents and athletes and coaches will take a heck of a lot from this. So thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. We appreciate it. It's super fun, and obviously we love to talk sports. And another point, we'll dig more into the goaltending world with you in the future at some point. It'd be great.
Sounds good.
So, Phil, I appreciate you asking so much about us, but there's something you're doing here that I think is really unique. You had this world where you're working with guys at the professional level. You're working with all these NHL goalies, and it's a giant thing. And they have all the same stresses and worries and everything else. But you took all that experience, and you're coming into this academy in this place that's such a great metro for youth hockey. And you have all these hopeful kids, hundreds of hopeful kids trying to make this dream work. You've worked with other places. Have you seen anything different here? Is there anything you're trying to go for here that really makes a difference? Because you've experienced it all.
The biggest thing that I took away from being around, I was fortunate to be around Tampa, and then when they won President's Trophy in 2018, and then with the Red Wings organization for 6 years, and see these players who are truly the best in the world at what they do and how they do it. It's, first of all, they all love it. Like, the best players absolutely love being, they embrace it. At some point, their passion for the sport was cultivated, and they're adults and they absolutely love it. The next thing is they care about everything. Every little aspect is something that is a concern to them. So how they sleep, they're paying attention to that. What they eat after a game, how is that going to affect their sleep, how their food is cooked, what it's cooked in, what the water they drink is coming from. Like, every little aspect, they just leave nothing to, like, the imagination. There's like, I need to know that. And I want it to be the best there possibly is, because they truly want it. They're the best in the world. But now it's like, I want to be better, or I want to stay here. And I was told at a young age, getting in the NHL is easy, staying there is hard. And I think that you see it all the time. You see guys who are there, but like, they can't quite stay there. And the ones who do stay there, I have so much admiration for the dedication it takes. So having the opportunity to work with, kids from before they're drafted and get to know them and get to know their families, and watch them after drafted and how they're transition in that new role of being an NHL draft pick, but not being in the professional ranks, to signing their first contract, to all the trials and tribulations. I remember one athlete having a hard time figuring out how to operate his first apartment. Like, here he's tons of pressure, but like, there was little life things that he'd never lived on his own. So like, seeing those and then come to the point where they're in the NHL playing in front of 20,000 people, but then having however many people commenting on social media about what they're going through. So having seen all that, and what we're trying to do at the academy is we're trying to prepare these athletes for those stresses. And my goodness, I hope so. I hope one of them, hope 2, 3, 4 of them get to play at that level. But ultimately, like, learning that they can affect every aspect of their life by just trying to be a little bit better, trying to be the best at what they do everywhere. And a little bit to your adage about sprinting, like those, when they're ordering a meal, they're asking, like, what was this cooked in? What's your steak cooked in? Just because they know that the nutrients matter, and like how the micro and macro nutrients matter, how they work together. They're thinking about that because it's a 24-hour thing. So, seeing those guys who play, like someone like Cam Talbot, who's playing well into his late 30s and playing well, and I could argue playing maybe better than he was 6 years ago. It's not because he was just blessed with something. It's because, my goodness, he'd do it like every day. He's in impeccable condition. He cares everything about what he eats. He's made adjustments in his diet midway through his 30s that's provided more, stability, injury prevention. It's helped him stay healthy. There's people like that is just, it's impeccable to see them get to stay there, and then see how they operate with the younger players around. And, so it's like seeing that small percentage of athletes and how they operate. And then knowing that we have this opportunity with the athletes here, and to be able to share some of those and ultimately cultivate their environment. They don't want to hear adults tell them about what to do all the time. But as adults, we can create an environment that they're learning by osmosis, they're learning by accident a little bit. And I think the more that we do that, the benefits are going to pay off exponentially. We might see them next week. We might see them by the end of the year. Hopefully, what I hope is, when they're 25, they're going to come back and be like, I learned a lot, and this has really helped me X, Y, or Z places. Because that's the ultimate hope for what we're trying to create here. And you guys are obviously a massive part of that. And it's been a lot of fun.
You mentioned this thing that I thought was really, really valuable. And it's like I didn't birth it. When Jeff and the guys birthed this whole thing was just trying to use every bit of experience they had, every bit of evidence they had to move forward. And when you came on, I didn't know where you'd come from because I thought you'd come from much more of a, hey, we got to win, we got to win, we got to win. That's where you lived. But it's interesting. One of our first conversations was you were talking about the importance of doing things that we have some kind of evidence that is real. We know in sports psychology and all of everything, there's research, but sometimes it's with 300 people or 1,500 people or whatever it is. And we're all constantly trying with research to figure things out. But you really talked about this importance of using all of our experience to when we're showing kids these things, showing them things that work, showing them things that that's evidence-based. Where did that come from? Because you came from a world that was just, win, win, win. Where did evidence-based come from? Because it's really such a solid thing and it's harmonious with what we're trying to make.
It's the best athletes in the world. They need more than just somebody's opinion. They're gathering their evidence from seeing somebody else's success and how they're playing, and in particular from a goalie. If they're playing dead angles and blow the dot and they're in RVH and they're over 6'4", it works. There's evidence of it, and they want to know that. That is a small goalie example. But if you're selling something, you're not, and selling maybe is the wrong word, but you're trying to help an athlete in an environment. You better tell them, like, this is why, here's the evidence behind it. This is how we're going to try to help you. This is an area where you can get better. Do you agree with that? Yes. The athlete usually knows better than anyone what they need to get better at. Here's some evidence on how this can help you. Let's work together to make that happen. Because ultimately at that level, in the role I was in, I was trying to help facilitate, be a bit of the scaffolding, making sure that they were reaching out to our mental sports performance, making sure that they were having regular meetings with the nutritionist, making sure that they were doing those things because they're the ones that have the evidence in their particular area. And, the best athletes, they want that. They shouldn't, nor should any of us just blindly take everything, that someone gives you. And that's why I'm just a big believer in that. I'd like to see the evidence in it. And prior with USA Hockey and the player development, there's real evidence in what USA Hockey developed and changed to try to create better, smarter hockey players and more skilled hockey players. So I guess in the last 10, 12 years of my career, it's always been, you take your professional experience and your life experience, but also put some evidence to it. Now you're putting together kind of a recipe that is it's good, and then I think that you can articulate it well to players and parents and everyone around the players' support staff. One of the things that happened right away was, I'm a big believer in mental sports performance. You get drafted, all right, I want you to make sure you talk to these people, and you hear, well, I don't need it. And then, you don't need it. And okay, until you do. And then once they do, all right, now, and then, that's a step. And then that player is able to articulate it to the next player who comes in and be like, you know what? I wish I would have needed that sooner, or I wish I would have got warmed up before I got on the ice, because these guys can really shoot the puck, all those little things. So sometimes they create their own evidence, and it's your job to be there to be like, all right, let's go now. Now you're ready for this help. I'm going to point you in this direction. This is how we're going to make this happen for you.
Great. I guess if you don't mind, just one more question is for our Goalie Nation, obviously, just to make sure our audience knows. Phil was, give me the correct terminology, Director of Goaltending. Is that the correct title of the Red Wings?
It was the head of goalie scouting and development, yeah.
So head of goalie scouting and development with the Detroit Red Wings. That was our hometown team that we both grew up rooting for as kids. And really, when we were kids, if you said, you and I, we were goalies growing up, if we said, yeah, I could be the head of goaltending for the Detroit Red Wings, we both say, wow, that's a dream job. That's amazing. So that's something something to be said about that. But I want to know from your experience traveling the world, scouting goalies, you've obviously had a vast array of the many different types of goaltenders there are, and then you've been able to see the ones that truly kind of make it and become that NHL full-timer. I don't know if there's one thing that can be quantified in there or a multiple sort of characteristics that you've been able to see be applied and stay in the NHL. As kids are growing up, that's the ultimate dream.
Competitiveness. Like the one attribute that separates those they're so competitive. Like they want to be great. And they want to stop him. Goalies, they want to stop every single shot. And that's what they live on. And anything they can do to help that, whether it's making sure their equipment is perfect and it's working for them, whether it's making sure that they've analyzed every bit of video and they understand where they need to be in play recognition, whether it's, I mentioned earlier, diet and exercise or strength training. Like they're just competitive. They want to be the best and they admire those who are there and they try to learn from them. But I think everything comes back to like those, the competitive athletes. There's a young goaltender playing at Michigan State now following your footsteps named Trey Augustine. Trey is wildly competitive. He's not competitive where he's going to be someone who's going to knock you over walking around. But if, I've heard on the golf course, he's competitive. If he's down a shot, he's going to stick it close on 18. If he's playing cards, if he's playing pickleball, or if he's playing in a big hockey game. I think we've all watched fans of USA hockey, seen him play on the world's biggest stages so far, and he's a competitive person. That's something that separates him, will always separate him. And I think that that's something that separates any elite athlete, but especially goalies, because to your point on like no highs, no lows, that game's still going on. You don't have time for highs or lows because you're still playing, and real competitive people are still playing. They're not thinking about what happened because they're in it. And that's far and away the best attribute and that can be cultivated. People say, oh, my 3-year-old's really competitive. Sure. 50% genetics, but 50% environment. And like, if you can cultivate a competitive athlete, it's a great thing.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for giving us that. Love it. Couldn't have been a better answer from our staff. So love it.
It's funny. It's like there's so much around it, but it's simple. It's a simple game. It's a simple sport. Goaltending, as much as we like to pretend it's complicated, simple job. I mean, just stop the puck in it differently on the power play, penalty kill. But there's a lot more. There's a lot of underlying layers to it, and being competitive, wanting to win that's part of it. Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for coming in today. Like, it's so fun to hear what you're doing on a daily basis with athletes and your how and why. And, so there's so many good things that parents, athletes, and coaches can take away from this and everybody else around. So thanks again, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, always a great time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for joining the Athlete Lab podcast, where we dive into the habits, characteristics, and everything else that's needed to drive elite performance.